Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beyond the Home Study podcast. This is where we have real conversations with foster and adoptive parents. So, thank you all so much for joining us today. We have a great interview for you. We have new friends with us. So, Laura Rose, I'll let you introduce them to us.
Hey guys, we're excited to be back. And I love it when we have a couple on. We don't get them very often. And it's really fun to be able to hear like both sides. So today we have Dan and Lindsay, and they are the proud parents of two adoptive children that they're going to tell us all about, a boy and a girl. So, Dan and Lindsay, thank you for being with us today. And can you tell us, just start our listeners out with where in the world are you?
We are in the middle of parenthood and just loving every minute of it. It's amazing how you long for something for so long, and then when you finally have it, every day is just surreal, right? You just are so grateful. The hard days, the easy days, the fun days, we're grateful for all of it, and just so extremely grateful to finally feel like our little family of four is complete. So
I love
Oh,
that.
that's so sweet. That's good. And so, before we started recording, you said you're in Utah. So, for anybody else who's listening and is in Utah, this is another family that you can see and hopefully relate to. So, yeah, let's just jump right in. I would love to know, like, what led you to adoption in the first place?
Well, it was kind of by accident, so to speak. We actually weren't open to adoption. We had gone through infertility for about 8 years, including 4 rounds of in vitro, um, and all the other things that lead up to having to get to that point of in vitro. Um, and unfortunately, none of those were successful. And so at what was it, January of 2018, end of January 2018, we were kind of at a loss of what to do next. Were we supposed to be parents? I don't know. We wanted to be, but it just kind of felt like nothing was going in our favor. Um, so we decided to take a break and hoped that we would eventually figure it out. And anyway, we knew adoption was an option, but there was a few things that we just weren't open to, and we were determined to have kids of our own. So anyway, fast forward to later that in the latter part of 2018, I actually had a pretty vivid dream, and in that dream, we had the opportunity to adopt a little boy. And I woke up from that dream and was just devastated that it was a dream and not real life, and could hardly wait to tell Dan about it. Um, anyway, it was one of those dreams that you can't stop thinking about. I thought about it all that next day for the days and weeks to come, just wondering if it was, something. Did it mean anything, or was it just I happened to have adoption on my mind? I don't know. Um, Anyway, so that was in August of 2018. And then a couple months later, we got a text from my brother. Um, and a guy that he worked with, his mom worked for an adoption agency here in Utah, and had received a phone call from an agency out in Virginia about a young girl that was looking to place her baby. And this agency in Virginia was wondering if the agency here in Utah had any birth parent or adoptive parents that would potentially be interested in adopting this little boy, what we found out to be a little boy. Anyway, my brother's coworker knew of our story and that we'd been trying for so long to try and have kids, and thought he'd reach out to my brother and just say, hey, my mom got this phone call today. Um, anyway, so when my brother texted us, we were kind of like, okay, this is interesting, because I had just had this dream a couple months before. Um, anyway, long story short, we ended up submitting a profile quickly to this agency out in Virginia. Talked with the birth mom once on the phone, and within about a week, found out this birth mom wanted us to adopt this little boy who is now our son. So he was born 8 weeks later. and born in Virginia. And
Wow.
it was amazing. I mean, there's so many details that lead up to that, but that's kind of the quick version of how we got our little boy. And honestly, I believe that that dream kind of opened up my mind and my heart, as well as Dan's, that that we were open to adoption, even though we didn't think we were. And so, anyway, he's our miracle. And so is our little baby, which we can go into that later, but that's kind of how it all came to be.
Wow, that's a really, like, incredible story. I've never yeah, I'm like, wow, I don't know that we've ever heard one that like, a dream kind of, like, sparked it, which is
Mhm.
really interesting. Dan, when Lindsay comes to you and says, like, "Oh, I've had this dream," what are you thinking?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, at first I was kind of amazed. Like I thought that was really, really neat that she had that dream. Um, and it just the way the detail that she explained, it just seems so real. And I think just the same way it opened up her heart, at least got me starting to think about that more as well. As hey, maybe that is an option that we need to look into, even though, like she said, we didn't immediately start looking into that. But definitely prepared us. And the neat thing is now looking back at it, I mean, like Lindsay said, you know, for years, that's all we wanted was to have children of our own. Uh, but then after getting our son and looking back, like we thought that was our path to have our own, right? But now looking back, it's like, no, this was our path. This brought him to us, and this is how it's supposed to be. And we can't imagine, a different way now.
Yeah, and I mean, I recognize the pain and the longing that you had too. Our journey was not 8 years, but it was a long time just desiring to have children. And yeah, I understand that of like being pretty closed off to a variety of different routes of doing that and just being like, no, this has to be. This has to like I am called. I am meant to be a mom. Meant to be, my husband meant to be a dad, like the whole thing. So, yeah, there's a lot of pain that I recognize that has come before the story that we're talking about now. So you also have a little 1-year-old. So did you adopt your 1-year-old? Tell us a little bit about that process and kind of what led you to that.
Yeah, yeah. So when we started the process I mean, we went, obviously it's been a few years because our boy is he's 7 years old now.
Hmm.
And when we decided that we were ready to start the process again, um, we reached out to an adoption um, consulting firm called ASA. I don't remember what it stands for, kid.
A step ahead.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I said that. Because Lindsay had done some more research and found, actually, remind me how you found them.
They came recommended by our social worker,
Oh,
who
okay.
did our home study as we prepared, for this next round of hopefully adopting. So she had sent several recommendations, but said I strongly encourage you look at a step ahead. So
Which we started looking at some adoption agencies here in Utah and reading different reviews. And when Lindsay came talking about, she'd done some more research about a step ahead and what an adoption, uh, the consulting firm, what they can do for us, and opening us up to so many more agencies like that really made sense to be able to give us a more options and a higher likelihood of finding a birth mom being chosen. Thought that was really cool. So we started working with them, and we actually the first time with our son, we kind of pieced together a profile and didn't look super great. We threw it together really fast, and it was like in the middle of the night when we put it together. And so with this one, we actually had them put together a very nice profile for us. So it kind of boosted our confidence there. And we pretty quickly got matched. And it was was it the day before Thanksgiving? It was the day before Thanksgiving. We were actually heading out of town. We found out that morning. And we were obviously super excited because it happened pretty quickly. Our son, he was also excited because he's part of this journey now for this second adoption.
mm,
And then let's see, a couple months later.
Yeah.
Yeah. We actually had some conversations with this birth mom. Well, we got a phone call. We did a video call with her as well. She spoke to our son. She spoke to us. Things were looking great. And then after a little while, things started to um, seem a little bit weird with some of the requests that were coming through. The agency that we'd used out in California, she had reached out a couple times and said, "Hey, the birth mom's asking for a little bit of money to help with this or to help with rent," things that were maybe a little bit out of the norm. So
Yeah, so that was January of 2024 that she started acting a little bit, or no, 2025.
yeah,
She started acting strange. Communication was hit and miss. She really only would respond back if you were giving her encouragement that she was going to get money, right? Otherwise, the agency in California is asking questions and trying to get more detail, and then she just wouldn't respond. So we decided that it was not going to work, and that we believe, and the agency in California believed, that she was in it for the money. She actually wasn't due until June of 2025. So we were still about 5-6 months out, and which is, it's a long time. But luckily, we hadn't started giving the birth mom much money yet. We'd given half of our deposit to the agency in California. We knew it was non-refundable, which obviously is a scary thing to sign for. But everything seemed great. Birth mom seemed great. The agency said she's a wonderful lady, nothing, no red flags whatsoever. But then when she started requesting more money, like Dan said, and just some weird things, then that's when we decided that this wasn't going the right direction. It was actually an advertising adoption agency that we'd been matched with. So they have certain resources that they don't, well, they don't have access to certain resources that actual adoption agencies do. So they would work with an actual adoption agency out there in California to get certain, pieces of information or whatnot. So after it failed, they decided to have this actual adoption agency that they work with look at what they call the adoption scam board. And this is a resource the agencies have that they can see if birth moms have either scammed or attempted to scam families in the past. And if it's proven that they did or attempted to, then their name goes on this scam board. Well, we had no idea that this existed, but they decided to check that after the fact that we had given them our deposit, after the fact that everything didn't end up happening. And so we felt frustrated because now we're out thousands and thousands of dollars. We're finding out that she did try to scam, was it 2 other families
I think so. Yeah.
within the last few years? And one of those families or couples had actually filed a lawsuit against her. And I think that was still an actual pending lawsuit.
Bye.
So just a big mess, right? And so we were very frustrated because we're dealing with that emotional side of things where we're no longer going to get this baby that we thought we were, and having to tell our little boy that he's not going to get a sibling like he thought he was. It was awful. And then we're dealing with this other side, the legalities, where we find out this scam board could have been checked prior to anything happening, prior to us sending our money and being matched and all of that. And so that really brought up a whole other what's the word you want to call it, just a mess. And so
Sure.
anyway, so then we go back to our consulting firm. We're talking to them. They're trying to work with the owner of this agency out in California, saying you've got to give this couple their money back. Like, this is an extreme situation where it's not just the birth mom saying, never mind, I don't want to move forward with this. This is a birth mom who intentionally was trying to get money from this couple, knowing she had no intention of actually placing her baby.
And we felt obviously that, we felt that the owner of the agency hadn't done, I guess, enough to, or
Sure. Well, they clearly didn't do their due diligence.
Yeah.
and yeah, so we were sitting there thinking, well, this should have been prevented, and
Right.
now you've got all of our money, and I've been, that's, if we're thinking we're not going to get any of that back because we signed some
Right.
papers, right? So but obviously we didn't expect this to happen at all, and so now we're thinking, well, great, we're out this money, and you guys know adoption obviously is not cheap, and so now are we in a position where we can move forward
Yeah.
and
So
continue trying?
when this is happening, I'm sure you're thinking like, but this is the same agency that you used before or no?
Different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, it was
completely
different.
different
Okay.
agency.
Yeah.
And was the agency like recommended by a friend or did you know anything about this particular agency before going into it?
Not personally, we didn't know. They were someone that A Step Ahead had worked with previously. Um, and I don't know how long it had been that they had, you know, done a placement through this agency. But that's how we got matched. Is A Step Ahead had received the birth mom's profile from this agency out in California. And so when that came through to us and all the other prospective adoptive parents who also were with A Step Ahead, everything looked great. Everything that we knew, which is always limited, but the limited information that we knew of this birth mom looked great. And so we told our consulting firm, A Step Ahead, we're interested in this birth mom. And so they sent our profile out to the agency in California and then had the birth mom review it. And she picked us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the advertising part of it is unique to me. That's something in like some of our agreements and things. We worked with a consulting agency as well. Not A Step Ahead, just someone who, again, had come recommended to us. And they connect you to either agencies or attorneys. And I thought, oh, that's kind of, that's interesting. Done my due diligence, I felt, of looking everything up, making sure that, like, is this, everything is like above board, everything's good. And so I remember when we got our retainer agreement from our attorney that it had like an advertising fee on it. And I thought, what's that all about? So I dug in and I asked some questions and things. And I wonder if that's kind of similar of like, it's basically like this. The way it was described to me was like it's the fee for the attorney to connect with the consulting agency, and it's a shared fee between that, things like that. So, but yeah, I've never heard of it like in the way that you described it. So it's really it's unique, and I mean, I'm sure you all feel the same way that like someone can come recommended to you and their situation was completely different because every family is different, every birth mom is different, every birth is different, like all of those things. So, yeah, how did you feel you were prepared for this going into it? Like completely blindsided, a little bit, like had you heard of this ever happening before? There's always a risk, so like kind of how did you think through that beforehand?
I felt like we were completely blindsided. And we knew that there's risks out there.
Yeah.
However, it felt so good at the time, and we've been communicating with her, so it all felt natural and real, and so it definitely blindsided us. And just like Lindsay mentioned, our son was well aware of what was happening because he'd actually talked to her,
Ugh.
and so it was really
Ugh.
hard
Yeah.
because then he's asking questions of, well, why aren't we getting our baby? Um, but
It's terrible.
going through, and the Step Ahead they were great to help us with this, and we pushed back a lot, we went back and forth with this agency quite a bit, and and a lot of those fees, the reasoning is that, well, that money that was received is used already in advertising or whatever else, just to run the business. And so, but finally, after some back and forth, we were actually able to get some back, half of it back.
But
And that
do
was,
you think that you would have gotten that back had you not had the consulting agency like advocating for you?
I don't know. I don't know. It was really odd because this agency, which we were working with the owner of the agency directly because it's just a small one. And she had been great from day one. Very communicative, very kind. Um, just she was great. And it just was actually surprising that when it all came down to this failing, that she was so just like, sorry, you know, sorry. And she said she felt bad, and I truly believe that she did, but she didn't feel bad enough to say, I'm so sorry that we didn't check this first. I'm sorry, we could have done this better. And that's where it was just like, okay, like, yes, we signed the paperwork. Yes, we knew the money was non-refundable. But one simple step that you could have done that you didn't caused this whole thing to turn out to where we are now. And so if she would have said, I am so sorry, this is on us, we'll give you your money back, it would have been a lot easier because, like I said, we hadn't given much to the birth mom yet, luckily. We were going to start paying her more in February, and this was January. And so a few $100s lost to the birth mom, that's doable. But thousands and thousands of dollars that's now in this agency's pocket that they're refusing to give us back due to very unfortunate circumstances, that's where it was tough to swallow. And did they have to check the scam board? Is that a law? No. Is it common sense? In my opinion, in our opinion, yes. Like if you are doing any kind of adoption work and placing families and couples with birth moms, that is common sense to me that you would check this board every single time, regardless of how good you feel about that birth mom that you're starting to work with. And that's what the agency said. She was great. I had no concerns about her. Well, she's, getting good at what she's doing. And so, yeah, it makes sense that you didn't have any concerns. This is becoming her career now to try and scam families. And so that's the part that eats at us, is that simple step that was missed.
Yeah, and we were given another option, which was, we could stick with that agency instead of not getting our money back. We could have stuck with that agency and continued to get profiles that agency had, and not lost out on the money, and applied that towards our adoption with that agency. But the problem was, is that just now we're held just to that single agency, and we don't have that broad reach that we had using the consulting firm. And so we kind of felt like that was maybe trapping us in a bad situation where we wouldn't be able to find someone quickly or find the right mom. And we didn't really like that idea.
Sure. Well, you probably lost your trust in them too. So
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We were completely turned off to continue moving forward with them. And, we had also paid the consulting firm money to have that broader reach across the country. So then we're feeling like it almost feels like a waste now because we're not getting that broader reach that we paid for. Now, like Dan said, we're down to one agency. And the owner of that agency even told us, I don't get very many birth moms walking through the door anymore.
Oh
So
gosh.
we could have been waiting 7 more years,
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
she would have had someone come through that we were good to move forward with, and B, that she was interested enough in us to pick us. And it didn't feel right to continue that direction. And so we went back to our consulting firm, and after a couple of weeks said, okay, this is hard for us to get back up and say, let's try again, but we're going to do it. And so we did, and they started sending us profiles of birth moms again. And it was just a couple weeks later that we got a profile of a birth mom down in Texas. Everything looked great. I mean, we
we were a little picky, right, with profiles that we wanted to see, just as far as like the health and the mother and everything. So
so everything looked great with this birth mom. We actually, because she was in Texas, you have to have an approved background check done in Texas before you can even be considered by a birth mom. We had happened to have that done just in case, and they were actually still doing that background check when we got matched with this first birth mom out in California. And so our background check came back in December after we'd been matched with the first birth mom, and we thought, well, I guess we don't really need this now, but here, to our consulting firm, we said, here's our approved background check. You can put it in our file just in case. And then the next month, that first adoption failed. The following month, we get this birth mom profile out of Texas. And the subject line in the email said her name, and it said approved Texas families only, meaning anyone that was already approved with a background check, only those families or those couples could submit for this birth mom. And we thought, okay, what are the chances that we had this done and
thought we didn't need to at one point.
Yeah.
Right.
So we only had until the next day to decide if we were interested enough to have them submit our profile. And again, like wearing our hearts on our sleeve, can we do this again? I don't know, but we're going to have the faith that if it's supposed to be, it will be, right? And so we told them to send it off, and we had until, was it 1 p.m. the next day?
Mm-hmm.
So they sent it off at like 10 o'clock that morning, and then around 2 o'clock, I got a text from our adoption coach, is what they call him, with a step ahead. And she said, "Can you talk?" with a bunch of exclamation marks. And I thought, okay, something good. This is something good. And anyway, she called and said, this birth mom that you submitted for in Texas has chosen your family to adopt her little baby. And I wanted to cry and I wanted to jump for joy, but at the same time, like, okay, but I'm still nervous because we already were matched once before, and then it failed. And so you're just so guarded about everything. But anyway, long story short, our baby girl was born about 9 weeks later, on April 15th, 2025. And she's a miracle.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
Oh, she's like freshly one. Like she just turned one.
Last week.
Yep.
That's so awesome. So throughout that process of like, that 9 weeks or so of waiting, how are you staying hopeful? Like, what are you telling yourself? What are you talking about between the two of you? How are you staying hopeful, but also seeking transparency and honesty? Like, what does that look like, even just in your own mind and in your own conversations?
That's a great question.
I don't know I think you get to the point where you don't have a choice but to be hopeful and just to have faith that it's going to work out. Knowing still in the back of your mind, knowing that there's a chance that something could happen again, but also thinking, well, what are the chances that's going to happen twice, right? But, I think, I just think you don't have any other choice. You have to just push through and be hopeful and trust that it's going to work out.
We're very religious people, but there's so many little miracles. I'm not supposed to cry in a podcast, but there was
That's
so
okay,
many.
and you can share freely. Abby,
we both cried.
You can share freely about faith. We cry. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, well, I'll still try not to cry, but there were so many miracles through all of it that, like, it just felt like this was supposed to be the one that was gonna work. So for me, that's kind of what kept me holding on was, there's just too many things that it doesn't seem like it couldn't work out. And so, for example, the cost of this adoption was almost exactly the amount less of the loss we took on the first one.
Wow.
So in a nutshell, we would have spent the same amount on this newest placement adoption that we would have spent on the adoption that failed, even with the financial loss that we took on that one. And that was huge for us because, I mean, it was the cheapest adoption that we had seen come through of all the birth mom profiles that we'd been getting. So that was rare to see a cheaper, even though it's not cheap, but it was the cheapest one we'd seen so far. But also the dollar amount was almost exactly less of the loss we took on the first one. And so anyway, it just started to feel like that first one had to fail to stall us to get us to this second baby, if that makes sense. And so for me, and I think I can say for us, that's a huge thing that kept us going in that 8-9 weeks, waiting until the baby was born. But again, you still in the back of your mind, the birth mom can still change your mind. And so many things can happen that will disrupt that adoption. But like Dan said, you can either choose to be hopeful or you can choose to be negative and say it's not going to work or it's not likely to work out. And we chose to be hopeful. So
I feel like adoption is so, I mean, there are other situations that kind of have the same feeling, but not to the degree. Adoption is so rare in that you want to get your hopes up because this is a good thing. And yet you still feel so guarded. Even if you haven't had, an unethical situation, you still know like this birth mom can change their mind and decide to parent. And then that's even, messy emotionally because good for her. I'm glad that, that you're going to do that. And it's just this crazy like up and down and up and down. And especially like also coming off of infertility and all of that. And you mentioned, and I hadn't even thought about this, your son. He also had to go through this up and down, because he's thinking we're gonna get this baby. Can you tell us a little bit about how you talked to him about that? When you got this, which is now your daughter, how did you walk him through this?
yeah, that's a good question as well. Because when we had to tell him that the first one wasn't going to work out, that that was one of the hardest conversations I've had as a mom. Um, but we had to help him be hopeful too, right? So you put on your brave face, um, and we just had to try and turn it to be a positive thing for him. But you could tell he was also guarded when we got matched again. He would say, "But what if we don't get her baby, mom?" And I just had to tell him that, there was that chance, but we were going to stay hopeful that we would. He was 6 at the time, and him being adopted at age 6, you're still trying to understand that process yourself. He knows he's adopted. We had that conversation with him a year or two prior. But if he's still trying to wrap his head around what that means to be adopted, and now he's trying to wrap his head around what this is like to adopt another baby into our family and to have these what ifs with the birth mom and just so many things. We definitely had to be delicate in those conversations with him, but it was also so fun to go through it with him, to give him a glimpse of what it was like for us to prepare for when he was born, right? And so, we're very transparent people and try to just be open and honest, but also acknowledge the fact that he was only 6 at the time. But any part that we could include him in, that was our priority. And we ultimately decided to take him with us out to Texas, which is where our little girl was born. We wanted him there for every bit of it, and just to see, even though we thought, okay, but if this doesn't work out and he's with us out there and we come home without a baby sister, it's going to rock his world. And so we knew there was a risk with that. But again, we chose to be hopeful, and it just felt like it was going to be okay. And so having him there for the 9 or 10 days that we were out there was so magical. And it just felt, I don't know, just to have our little family there, and to bring our baby girl back to the hotel while we waited for all the process to go through. Just the most incredible experience for us. So
I love that.
Yeah,
It's
well,
Go ahead.
no, it's just yeah, it's so neat just with him being part of it and have that connection, and just with him knowing about his adoption story, and just be able to, and he talks about it with pride, right? That he's adopted, and with pride that his little sister's adopted, and so it's just so cool to have him share that type of experience with her, and just sweet to see how he was with her in those first days.
Yeah. Oh, it's so sweet. And it's such a gift. Having a sibling is an immense gift. So it's just really sweet to
Yeah.
see it. So I think I have an idea of one of these things, but I'm going to ask it as a little bit more of a broad question. What are some of the things you wish someone had told you before you went through this, we'll say your second adoption process?
Something we wish someone told us before.
I'll answer first, and that is this adoption scam board, that this exists out there. And when in one of the many conversations when we were talking to the owner of A Step Ahead, I remember saying I wish every prospective adoptive parent or family knew that this existed. And if they all do know this, then they need to be asking the agency, the consulting firm, whoever they're working with, have you checked this scam board before I send you any money or sign any paperwork? Have you checked this scam board for said birth mom? And to me, it should be a law that is checked. But obviously, that's going, that's big. But yeah, because had we known that, we would have asked, they would have found out, this whole thing would have been avoided. So that's my biggest theme.
Yeah, and there's a lot. There's a lot that we didn't know going into, especially with our son, because that happened so quickly, and like Lindsay mentioned earlier, we weren't even looking at adoption. I think what Lindsay mentioned is a great one. I would say maybe instead of something I wish I knew, something that I would say that others should know. Besides that, is that how great it is to be able to work with one of those consulting firms. I think that's something that was huge for us. Something that others should know they're looking at adoption, because it's just so great not to have to limit yourself to working with one group and having limited options, and just keeping that reach really broad, and just giving yourself more of a chance.
Yeah, when so we had Valerie on a previous episode, and I'll admit I didn't even know what a consulting agency was. I adopted through foster care, and so yeah, I was shocked. I was like, wow, what support. How great that there's someone out there that, like, not only do they broaden the net, like that's great too, but it sounds like they really just also support you more than, I mean, it's a really scary thing to just be like, I guess let me Google adoption agencies.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's pretty much what you're doing, right? It just feels daunting to feel like you're at the bottom of this mountain, knowing there's so many options, not only within your state, but within the country. And how do I know who the right agency is? There an agency I'm supposed to find? Is there a baby that's meant to be for me, or is it just by chance and luck? And there's so much with that. And that's, I think, one reason why it took us a while to get going the second time, is because it just felt so overwhelming to know who to go with. And then you hear the horror stories, and just, yeah. And so when we found out that there was such thing as a consulting firm, it just completely turned everything around for us, and it felt so much easier. So,
And like you mentioned, Laura, is having that support, because we had our coach, they call them coaches, and texting frequently and holding the hand along the way. So not feeling like you're alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, you guys, we are going to link a step ahead at the bottom of the show notes today. So, listeners out there, if you're looking for a reputable consulting agency, we will link that. You could also, I'll try to link the previous episode. I'm not 100% sure I can do that, but I will try so that you can listen to that episode with Valerie. But Dan and Lindsay, thank you guys so much for sharing your story with us. It's so important for our listeners to hear, all sides of adoption. And we just thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And listeners, we will be back next week. And if anything we have said today has made you laugh, cry, or feel seen, please share this episode with a friend. Bye, guys.
Thank you.